Welcome to the Map It Forward podcast, everybody. Today's episode of the podcast is brought to you by Elixir Specialty Coffee, a sponsor of this podcast and of our new merch store. If you order anything from our merch store this month, above $20, you will get a free bottle of Elixir shipped to you anywhere around the world. Today on the podcast, I am super excited and very honored to have the amazing Heather Perry. Hi, Heather.
Hi.
It is an honor to have you. I got to say, I'm a big fan of your work. And
thank you.
Lady, you have been a trailblazer for people, not just women, but people in this industry. And it's really been great for me to watch you from afar, from Australia, as I was coming up. I guess where I want to start this conversation is something that it's a question I often start with fascinating people is like, how did you know? Like, was there a moment in when you first started off in coffee, was there a moment when you knew this was going to be a thing?
So I grew up in a family coffee business. So it's my family's business. And, I think when you grow up in a business, it's not necessarily what you say you want to then go and do, right? Family businesses are tough, and it was a small family business. This isn't a giant one. When we started, my parents opened our first coffee house when I was 10. And so, for the first decade, every birthday and holiday, our whole family's in Klatch shirts because we were always coming from work going to work. It was like we're closing the store to run to Christmas Eve. I had many birthdays at Klatch. And so I think when you're a young kid and it's that involved in the business, it is, I don't want to say we're resentful towards it, but my sister is a good example because she was much more like resentful towards the business. Mm-hmm. She felt like it ruled our lives. She's 5 years younger than me. So, she had her play corner where, she had her crayons and coloring set up. And after school every day, we went to the store and that's what we would do. I worked every Friday and Saturday with my dad because the Friday and Saturday nights were really busy for us. So my dad and I would work those. And so that was what we grew up doing. And so it was never this thing of it's like, I love working in the cafe and this is what I want to do forever. It's definitely not where I came from at all. I was a feisty teenager, and so when I turned 18, I moved out.
Did you really?
Oh yeah, and it was not a positive thing at all. Like it was. Me and my parents. I think I was not a fun teenager. I'm one of those.
You were challenging.
Yes, yeah, not terrible, but just obnoxious and challenging. And so I think. My birthday's July 8th, and I think July 9th I moved out. Like, it was something I had planned.
Wow.
It was no joke. Like, I'm out. And, my parents and I still had a relationship. I still worked for them, and they paid for my schooling, and I went to college. And I always went to college with the intention of going to law school afterwards. That was what I had wanted to be for as long as I can remember. Mm-hmm. Being a lawyer is probably the only thing that I can ever remember wanting to be, honestly, kind of growing up.
You'd be a fucking badass lawyer. You really would.
It's what I always wanted to be, for sure. And so, all through college, that was what I was working towards. I got my degree in international business and marketing. I minored in political science and Spanish, and that was what I was doing. And I worked my butt off in college. I was going to be in and out in 4 years. I wasn't messing around. I worked 50, 60 hours a week. And I worked as a somewhat of a barista wage to a shift lead wage to a man. My parents paid me what everybody else got paid. That's the way it's always been in our family. There's no special treatment if you work for the family at all.
I can relate to so much of this. It's not funny.
To the point as well where, I was in one morning and, we hit a bad spot, my parents and I, and, when I was, 19 probably, and I was, grabbing breakfast, and my dad's like, you didn't pay for that. He's like, it's a 25% employee discount. I shit you not. It's happened. So, and if you know my dad, you're like, oh, yeah, Mike would do that. It's like, yep, my dad did that. And, that's where, and that obviously put us off to another year of not in a good place, but you get through it.
Yeah, you do.
I grew up and matured, and he has not matured, but we know how to do it.
I have a twin sister, and she says to me, look, Lee, you have, because my relationship with my dad is not great. Yeah. And she just says, I've always kind of looked at that and said to her, she's the golden child. And I said to her, how do you do it? And she would always say to me, Lee, you just have to accept the misgivings and the limitations of the people that you love. And I'm like, yeah, good for you. I'm glad that works for you. It's not a perspective I can take, but you know.
I totally can relate to that. You know, I mean, like, I'm in a place with my dad right now on certain things where, you know, I just certain things like where I would have fought him and like argued with him as much as like 2 years ago. These I'm like, whatever, like moving on. Like, you know, just like I know where my battles are. I know. And he's a feisty person too. He's very dependent on his moods. And so, you know, it's hot or cold with him at any given time. And so, you know, you just know when to take it. And I've gotten much, much better at that, which makes it easier to have a working relationship. But so, you know, that's what I was doing through college. And my last year, my family's also very competitive. And so when a barista competition came up, I think we had managed to get on some decent terms at this point. And it was coming to Anaheim, the U.S., and at that point it was the North American Barista Championship. And so I knew I wanted to compete, and I went there, and I did awful. I think I got like last or second to last. Tuna and Sonia from Iceland were judges. They were European judges who came over at the time, and I did like this s'mores drink, and I wore a cowboy hat, and I had a holster, and I like told the judges, like, if your marshmallows catch on fire, make sure to blow them out. And they're like, why are we spitting on our drink? Like, this story is like lives bigger than me. Like this cowboy hat, it's just like
that's fantastic.
And the greatest thing is it's like Sonia. So I gave her a boot when I was competing in the WBC. The few years later, I gave her like the boot that I had served for my very first competition, the glass. And she like leaves it in her training room, and for her it's this thing, and it's just like, yeah, when people come to train with me, I'm like, this was the worst drink I've ever had in my life, and she went on to get second in the world. So there's hope for everybody.
How awesome is that? I think I can too. I know I can, right?
Yes.
That's awesome.
Oh my God. Yeah. So that was what happened.
Did you like? Well, was competition something that fed you, or was it something that you're like, oh, fuck, I got to do this?
Both. I'm like, oh, fuck, I got to do this because it feeds me.
Yeah, you got to teach me how to be more competitive. I've been thinking about this a lot. Like, I don't have a competitive bone in my body. Like, I feel like as a kid, I played a lot of sports, and I conditioned that shit out of me.
Yeah. And
now I'm like, I'm so curious, but not competitive.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to hinder me in business.
I don't think so, because I think there's a nice part of being competitive where you're also not limited. So like I always tell people when they come to me for competition training, right? Like people always start with these like romantic stories about why they want to compete, and these like romantic stories about the coffee they want to use. I'm like, I don't really care about that. We care about a score sheet. We care about these 600 points and how you're going to get the most of them. I don't care about anything else. So it's like this coffee that you love, it's not going to score well. It's not an option. Like, you know, so I do think competition also puts limitations on things, because it's not an open wide world. It's like, no, like when I compete, like I was never somebody that's like, I'm going to compete because it's fun and it's great. Like, nope, if I'm going to go through all of that
I'm going to fucking win.
Yes. Like, it's too much work to just be like, oh, whatever happens, happens. Like, it's too much. So that's just my approach on it. But, you know, doing things now where, like, my husband always jokes, like, if I ever went back to competing, he would leave me. He's like, me and the kids are out.
Do you get, like, razor focused? And
Yeah, I'm not like, this is the funniest story, too. So my husband and I started dating in like 2005, something around that time. Yeah, somewhere around there. And he's like, yeah, I didn't really think you liked me for the first couple of years, because I was competing. And I'm like, why did you stick it out? He's like, you kind of kept me around and I liked you. And I thought you liked me, but it was kind of hit or miss at any given time. And I was razor focused.
Well, it's this weird thing that when I'm focused, if I'm on bar, back when I was on bar, like I'd be super focused, and everyone's like, why are you so upset? Why are you so like, you've got like this serious, I didn't know this, like a resting bitch face. Yeah. And when I'm focused on something, everyone's like, well, you fucking hate everybody. I'm like, I don't hate anybody. I'm just focused on shit. I've got to get stuff done. Like, it feels like you hate the world. No. Yeah.
Right, I don't. I just am focused, and you're a distraction currently.
Yeah, kindly step aside. You take second fiddle to what the fuck I'm trying to achieve. Right. Oh, man. Why didn't you follow law?
So after I won the U.S. Barista Championship in 2003, it got me the first opportunity to go to Origin. And I had never been to Origin before. And for me, like working in coffee was working in a cafe. That's what it was to that point, you know? And yeah, I mean, being a barista is great, but I've never been the mentality of like, yeah, people should like, I've never been of the mentality. It's like, yeah, you want to be a barista for your entire life, because like being a barista, if you do it, like it's cash handling and it's food making and it's bathroom cleaning and it's dishes and it's sweeping and mopping. And it's like, that's great. And there's certain parts of barista that I love doing, but I don't want to do that forever kind of thing. So going to Origin, though, really opened up my eyes to a whole nother side of coffee. I got to train for the first time, which I had never done before. And I didn't realize like teaching people how to compete and working them through that wasn't even an option. And, you know, when you're champion, gives you other opportunities to do some traveling, which is great. Speaking and so on. And I love that side of it.
You are great at that.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, dude, I watched you at Rico for 2016.
Oh, yeah.
You look stunning, first of all. Your
you.
stage presence, your charisma really comes forward, but you have a great speaking voice.
Thanks. And it's something that I really enjoy that side of it.
You're very good at
that.
it.
Thank you. So, that showed me, it's like, oh, well, I mean, law school's not going to go anywhere. You know what I mean? I can put it off for 1 year and I can continue these opportunities that I have as champion and follow that through. Because you can't do law school part-time, right? Like you're in or you're out of it.
Yeah.
So I was supposed to put it off for a year, and that was what happened. And I just never looked back. I just fell in love with that other side of what coffee can be, and learning more about coffee and then sharing that with other people and then putting it on. I think that's another reason that I like competing, is I do like that I do like having that presence and being on stage and doing that side of things. So
you're one of the champions that I'm going to get into trouble for saying this, but I'm going to say it anyway because that's never stopped me before. You're one of the champions that completely bypassed the ego side of it, from what I could see from the outside. To me, it wasn't that you were, and I've seen this with regards to your career, I think. I don't get an ego thing from you. I'm excited and curious about the work. I'm driven by the work. Do you think that's accurate?
Yeah. Because I definitely don't think I have an ego in the sense that like I think I'm better than everybody else. I think I can work harder than most people, and that's super genuine on that piece of it.
No, I know.
And like Stephen Morrissey knows, like I hate that he won the World Barista Championship because it was his first year competing. I'm like, that's bullshit. Like you did not put your time in. That is not fair. And like he knows, like I'm so unhappy. I'm like I was not voting for you. You did not put in the work. You did not deserve it. So you know, I definitely think it's.
Why did he win?
More of that. I mean, he served the best coffee.
Yeah.
So and that's what it's about. So, but a lot of the other champions that you see, it's something that they've been doing for years, and for you first compete once or twice in your national, and then kind of win that after your second or third try, and then you come to the world once or twice or three times for a lot of people, and continue to move up. For Stephen, he won his national first time, he won the international first time. Wham bam, thank you, ma'am. He took his trophy and went home.
I feel like I'm getting this. I'm in my almost mid-40s now, and I'm thinking about like, what have I learnt in life about like weird shit like beginner's luck and the way that the grind goes and all that kind of stuff. And I think I'm not 100% locked down on this. I think we all get a certain amount of beginner's luck to apply to different things, and wherever it hits, and you just got to ride it when it happens. And for some of us, we use it up, and for some of us we don't, because some people try hard shit and other people don't try hard shit. It's one of those things that I've been trying to get people to gravitate towards in our industry, because I think we're going to struggle long term if we don't get more people that are stepping into doing hard shit. And I'm a believer of this beginner's luck thing. Like, you got to ride it. Like, if it happens and you hit that wave, you just got to go with it and ride it and see where it takes you. It's one of those signalers of you could be good at this. Do you think so?
Oh yeah, there's absolutely beginner's luck, and I like the way you put it, where like you never know where it's gonna come, right? Like it might not be in competition, it might not be in business, it might be in something small in your life, it might be something big, but everybody's gonna get lucky here or there with something, and some people ride that wave perfectly, and it takes them to you know what I mean, do something amazing and huge and great. And I think if you look at like the most CEOs of big companies, they will say it's not just about, you know, it's I happen to get the right meeting on the right day. I happen to get the fill in the blank. Nobody just does everything perfect. And if you do, there's a chance it will go nowhere. You have to be able to also just get that stroke of luck to go with you also. I could not agree with that more.
100%. It's one of those things that I've been trying to figure out, like, is there a recipe? Is there a formula? Is there something that I can figure out that I can help people understand? And I don't think there is.
Right.
I'm not set on it. I just feel like it's one of those things when you feel like the momentum and the flow is happening. If you're aware that beginner's luck is a thing, you gotta take it and fucking ride it as far as you can take it.
Yeah.
It's one of those things. Could you do me a favor? Can you turn off your camera and then turn it back on again? Yeah. You're frozen in like the most gangster position. It's so badass.
Let me see here. What if I hang up on you?
No, don't do that.
I know. I'm trying to figure out how to turn off my camera on Skype.
So you can, if you just scroll over the top of your screen, you can see the little video thing. Just let me see if I can do it from here.
Not wanting me to.
No, that will turn off mine.
Oh, I think because it's frozen on my side. But you're not frozen.
No, I'm not, but you are.
Yeah, like I can see you moving.
Can you see you moving?
I cannot see me moving. I see me frozen.
Yes, you're frozen.
Yes.
Can you see the gangster position that I'm talking about? You totally look like you're going to fuck some shit up.
Just perfect. I planned
it. Really is. You have one of those personalities that you could... Oh, are you there? Miss Heather.
I knew that was going to happen. Hi. I'm so sorry.
That's okay. It worked. It's fine. I just got to reposition something. Won't be a moment. But this is what happens with live stuff. No problem. There we go. We're back. So at what point of competing do you turn around and say, well, shit, I'm just gonna keep writing this?
Like keep competing?
Yeah. Like, do you get to second in the world and think I'm so close?
Yes. And then you think I got to second in the world, that's as close as you're going to get. Do you know what I mean? Like that's like you took your luck and that's where your luck got you. You missed out. Yeah, I think it's so hard, especially when you've gotten that close. And I competed for 5 years at that point. And competing the year that I took second in the world. So I always started practice just based on the season at the time in January. Mm-hmm. And so I would start it in January, and between January and August when I competed in the worlds, there were 2 weekends that I did not practice at our warehouse, that I was not practicing.
Wow. And you were married at this point?
No, I was dating.
You would have been divorced by that point.
Yeah, exactly. Not to marry me, but yeah. I mean, he spent plenty of weekends there washing out cups and tasting cappuccinos and espressos.
Did he ever get curious about getting into coffee?
He likes coffee. So he loves drinking coffee and that type of stuff, but no, not getting into coffee. And when we got married and talked about getting married, it's like, so you will never work for Klatch, like here right now.
Let's have a Chinese wall so that we know these are the rules of how we will make our marriage survive.
And we will never work together, and that will be what we do. So yeah, that was something I called out from the very beginning. It's like, I work with my entire family. I don't need to add you to the bunch.
No, that's probably a really good thing. How do you do it? Like having a family, working full time, being so engaged in everything that you're doing with SCA and boards.
I'm a huge fan of it takes a village, right?
Yeah, great.
I don't even pretend like I'm getting this done on my own. So my mom is my babysitter. And every time we talked about having another kid, it was like, so Mom, how would you like to have another grandkid to babysit? Because it would be a burden on her for sure. And so, that
You have 2 or 3?
I have 3. So
you
7
have the cutest fucking children in the world. I'll just tell you. I remember seeing them once when I was visiting at Klatch, and then watching you guys travel around Japan and Korea, right?
Yeah, yep.
The cutest kids ever.
They are super cute. I'm ready to sell them, but
my mum would have said that about us too.
Like, I think I can get a good amount for them.
Yeah.
Particularly that little one, man. She is feisty, but oh my gosh, she's
and cute as hell.
Yeah, but I genuinely think, like, on that trip, my father-in-law came with us, and so he was able to help out with the kids, so I could get work stuff done. So, for me, I think it's about, making every opportunity count. I try, because I can't separate work and family, I don't even try. It's like, hey, I got a work trip, we're all going. I kind of embrace the opportunities and try and make it an added bonus instead of just always like, oh, we're going to Klatch, which every day when I pick my kids up from school, I pick them up from school like half the time. My mom does the other half. Yep. But every day when I pick them up, they know we're going to a Klatch. They don't know which one, and that's their follow-up question is, it's like, which Klatch are we going to? Because there's the one with the bagels, there's the one with the TV, there's, what I mean? There's something different about all of them that they like. But so they know that, but they also know that, like, hey, we work really hard because we get to do things like go to Korea and Japan for 2 weeks. And so we try and tie that in. It's like, no, we work hard. And it's like, why do we have to go? It's like, got to make that ducats, man. That money doesn't just come. So, I don't know.
So they get that from now. They understand that mindset.
Yes. Yeah, it's not something that I try and hide at all. Like, I will absolutely take calls during dinner. I will, you know what I mean? I will be the mom, like, at the Christmas play, looking, answering texts on my phone from somebody, like things that got to get done. So I think it's just a matter of not trying to separate them. That whole, like, work-life balance thing, I don't think that is a thing. I don't think you can have it. I think you have to make a world where they both complement each other and you enjoy both of them.
Especially when it's your business.
Right. Yeah.
It's a whole different ballgame when it's yours. It's,
There's no detail too small for me to look at. Does that make sense? And, like, sometimes it's like, why are you bothered by that? It's like, because if I'm not bothered by it, it doesn't get taken care of. Like, I'm the person who has to be bothered so I can figure out a solution for it. Like, there's nothing that's off the table.
Did it surprise you how much is involved in that side of things? I know you were raised into it, but at the same time, has any of it surprised you?
It's so funny. I think when I was younger, I probably didn't appreciate the importance of the small things. I knew them, and I was like a teenager, and I'm like, I don't care about this. Like, you know, and it's like, why are you harping on me? Like, I do with my staff on certain things. And now for me, it's like, guys, there's water spots on these plates. You got to wipe them down. Or, whatever it may be, like all those little things, I know I was there. So it's funny because I did not notice it 5 years ago, but I've been noticing it now. Where it's like all of the, like, where I was as a teenager is very much so where my staff is at certain times. And it's like, all right, so I know how I felt. I got to figure out new ways to communicate this because I know that just harping is not going to get us anywhere. So, like, how do we get people invested and excited about those little things? And you can't do it with everything. Sometimes you just have to call it out. It's like, sorry, it's just part of the job and it sucks. You don't have to get it. You just got to do it, kind of thing. And then there's other things where I think it's like, no, we can really change the approach on it to make it something that it's like, where they understand and they appreciate it. It's like, oh no, I like working. It's funny, we just did an exit interview, and the girl, I expected to get kind of nothing good out of the exit interview. I mean, she wasn't with us for very long, a few months at most. But it was like the most complimentary exit interview, and she didn't even show up for her last week. So I literally expected it to be like, Klatch is stupid, I don't like it, the management sucks. And it was actually crazy complimentary. It's like, high quality coffee and training is most important. And, it was just everything that she did was like, wow. I was like, I had no idea that would have been her response to that. So it also was very fulfilling to be like, all right, so our message is getting across. Even when I don't think people are listening, it's like, all right, people are listening.
The message is getting across. You thought it was great to be here, and yet you still didn't show up for your last week.
Yeah, that's another issue. But
I want to talk about it because it's fucking me up, dude.
Retail's rough right now, and we can talk about, like, finding the right people and stuff, and, you have to find people that fit your culture, and there's a certain extent of that, but there's also an extent where it's like, you got 100 people who work for you, and, they're at different phases in life, and the reality is most of them are in a phase where it's like, this is a transitional job for most people, and there's a lot of benefits. We don't do a small menu, so we don't necessarily attract, like, coffee connoisseur baristas to come work for us because we do a lot of food. We have blenders in our cafes. Like, we do all of that as well. So,
but you've also survived.
Yeah.
a long time in business because of it.
Yeah, and I think one of the reasons that we've been able to survive is it's like if you were to look at Klatch 25 years ago when we started, you'd be like, oh my God, who is that company? Like, what is that menu and what are they serving and how are they making espresso? What is going on? But I think something that we've tried to do is be relevant without being trendy. And that's a really fine line to walk. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not going to introduce every little thing that comes along. It doesn't always make sense. I try every new thing that comes along and I peek my head around the corner. I'm like, well, does that interest me? Tell me more. And then it's like, nope, that does not fit my brand. That is not what we want to be. And then there's other things where it's like, all right, I could see how this could fit for our customers. This makes sense as an add-on. This makes sense as a change. This makes business sense as well. We used to carry 20-ounce drinks. We don't do that anymore. Why? I think there's a lot of reasons. One, I think, getting rid of it helps to reduce cost of goods. There's a business case for it. And for me, we don't have investors at all. So everything that we do in-house and organically. And so we can't have a flagship store that doesn't make money, right? Like, no, you have to make money. I'm
fascinated by people who think that it's okay for your flagship store to lose money.
Oh, no, when we open a store,
Intelligentsia in Venice Beach. Hello.
Have you been to the new Verve in downtown?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yes.
It's beautiful. I would love to have it.
It's gorgeous.
Yes, I love having coffee in it. Klatch will never be building one of those.
It's like, okay, we're going to build a flagship store. I mean, in Venice, I remember standing in the line there with Paul Gashos years ago. We were in the queue for fucking 20 minutes and there was not a lot of people ahead of us. Yeah. And look, it's a beautiful, back in its day, it was a beautiful store and it was great, the level of service that you got. But they had to be hemorrhaging money.
And that's just not something we can do at Klatch. So,
well, nobody should be.
Yeah, I mean, we're in the suburbs too. And so we, for us, the way that I describe what I try and do at Klatch for our customers, it's like no matter where you are in your coffee journey, we're going to meet you there, right? So if you are somebody who likes your sweet, like we do hand scoop shakes, we have 3 of them. They all use the same ice cream. They all use fresh espresso. And then it's just a little bit of milk or chocolate to make it delicious for you. But if you want the best coffee in the world, we're selling it for $100 a cup right now.
Fuck
so you can order that as well. And that's kind of the way that I envision it. No matter where you are, we're going to meet you there. I'm not going to put, we're not just serving one. It makes it hard to do well because we serve many masters. You know what I mean? I have people who want their coffee in 5, who want to get their coffee and be in and out. And I have other people who it's like, let's talk about this for the next 30 minutes. Yep. And so for my staff to be able to balance that, that's rough, and being able to, we do a ton of training on reading your customers, meeting them where they are, meeting their silent needs is such an important part of the business that we really spend a lot of time on customer communication, how you're interacting with them and being able to answer those silent requests that nobody's going to come in and say necessarily, I'm in a hurry, but you're going to read that body language and you're going to know what, that customer's an in and out. You're not going to sit there and pepper them with additional questions. It's an in and out kind of thing. And you have other customers who, they're in with their family. They're meeting their girlfriends. You're going to ask about the babies. You're going to do those kinds of things because that's why they're there. And then you're going to have other customers who they're like, so what's on the brew bar today? And what's your favorite? And what flavor notes? And you're going to engage with them on that. So it's not easy to work at Klatch for that reason. I think it's less even like a menu or the fact that we do food or that piece of it that makes it tough. I think it's the fact that so many customers have so many different styles when they come in and being able to meet them all.
How does staff respond to the intensity required to understand that? Because that should be the experience at every single cafe.
Yeah. Some of them do it better than others, frankly. You know what I mean? And the nice thing is so when we hire people, when we build staffs, we know when we interview, oh, they're good for this store right now. Oh, they're good for this store right now. Because our stores are close enough where they can trade. If you're applying with Klatch, we can put you at a few different locations usually. And even for a store that's off on its own, when they're hiring, it's like, this is the personality you need in here. And sometimes it's like, you have too many guys, you're not allowed to hire any more guys. Or it's, you have too many girls, I need some guys in here. Because you have to have that balance of gender. Yeah. Everybody brings something different to the table. I don't want to store with too many coffee people. No. Because not all of my customers are coffee people. Yep. So I want people who can just I don't want to say be normal, but you know what I mean? Who it's like, you've got that balance in there as well. And they're going to ask the questions about the babies and the school because they're not my coffee people. But I can't have a store that has no coffee people because that's part of what Klatch is.
Because how do you sell $100 cup of coffee with no coffee people that understand about varietals and things like that?
Right. So, that's how we try and pair the stores and build the stores so that they've got that good community behind the bar. They've got that good culture, that balance, that they represent the customer base. I think that's the biggest thing is with the staff, we try and represent the customer base. So we don't necessarily ask everybody to be everything, but you try and build it so that at any given time, customers can kind of go towards who they need to get there.
Do you find that customers prefer certain baristas?
Customers prefer certain people, prefer certain stores. Yes, every customer has their preference and it's for a variety of reasons. Usually, there's a few people who are like, Luis pulls the best espresso, or this person makes the best cappuccino. We've done a little bit of that. A lot of it has to do with vibe of store.
Yeah, really.
People have a favorite store because I love the vibe here, because it's more casual, it's more comforting, whatever it may be. I have other people who love another store because it's quicker. And, we build the needs on that. So it's nice to have stores that we have cut. I would say over half of our customers go to multiple stores. So they get to see the different experiences at each Klatch, and they kind of compare them against each other and have their favorite that they go to.
I have a friend who, he's an acquaintance who is big in the weed business, and he loves Klatch. Oh, my God. He's there 3 times a day. The one at...
the Rancho one.
Yeah. And he's just like, they know what I want. They treat me well. If I want to talk more about coffee, they can talk more about coffee. And if I don't want to talk about coffee, they just let me be.
Yeah.
I'm like, I love that he just gets it. It's just so nice to see that. He's obsessed with you guys. He tells everyone, that's what you want, right?
Yep.
How quickly did you open all of the stores?
Oh, very slowly. So funny enough, our original store opened 27 years ago. 4 years after our first one, we opened our second one. And then it was just those 2 for the longest time. And then we had some carts at a hospital for like a 5-year period during that. But then we opened our Ontario store. It would now be like 8-9 years ago. So like 15 years after the first one, we opened that one. And then in the past 2 years, we've opened a Redondo store, a Fontana store. So it's just been growth very recently as far as the retail store goes. And again, it's organic. We've never done, in 2 weeks, we are doing our very first strategy meeting.
Congratulations.
Yes.
Great time, a new decade coming up.
Yeah. So I don't know. It's funny because I'm in the middle of putting the email together, the people who are going, and my dad's obviously going. But my dad will pretend to want to talk about something, but as soon as you disagree, then it's immediately an argument because you disagree. It's like, wait, I thought we were having a conversation, and you can't. So I literally have to put it out where it's like, here's the layout, here's how the meeting will go. You tell me what topics you will actually talk about. Because if you have your mind made on any of these, we're not even going to bother because you're just going to waste our time. It's like, what are you actually willing to engage and have a conversation about and say, oh, I actually like that way of thinking. Because if anything is you're not willing to, we're taking it off now. So it'll be interesting to see how it goes. We've never been, all of our growth up to this point has just been because it made sense at the time. An opportunity came and that opportunity made sense. So now looking at it saying, so what do we want to pursue?
Right. So you were reactive and now you want to be more proactive. Yep. How fucking exciting.
Yeah, it's scary and exciting, you know what I mean?
Yeah, new territory.
Wow, now we're putting out real goals and it's well, we're going to go after stuff and we just haven't done that in the past. So and I don't know where we're even going to come to. I don't think out of the strategy meeting we're going to say we want to open 10 more retail stores. I don't think that's what we'll say at all. I will not support that.
If there's anything I know about strategy meetings with people who are, as long as not everyone, but as long as there's enough people in the room that are open-minded, the things you walk away from are usually very different with what you thought was going to end up happening. And that's so exciting.
I'm excited for it. I think it will be fun. I think it will be eye-opening for all of us. I think it will be a different way to look at the company than we've ever looked at it before. So I totally could see I don't know what's going to come out of it, and I think that we probably will walk away with more questions than answers, honestly, where it's all right, so we need to do this again because now we all have to kind of stew on the conversations from the past few days and let's do a recap in a month. And now it's okay, so let's really be, we're not going to decide over a weekend. Yeah, we're totally going to invest all of our money into this one thing. No, but we might actually have conversations where it's like, okay, yeah, we want to make a big investment here. Let's stew on it. Let's think about it. Let's make a business plan and come back in a month and see if that actually makes sense. So,
have you always been open-minded? Or do you not see that in yourself?
I'm open-minded, but I'm also very much like, once I make a decision, it's hard to get me off track for that decision, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily, I think sometimes things get overthought, and I still don't, I'm not an overthinker. Like, I will hear two sides of an argument. My husband says it this way, like, I'm black and white. So, like, I'm open-minded, but once I make my decision, I'm going to go with it and I'm going to move forward.
Well, yeah, you see a direction. Like, you don't,
yes.
You strike me as the kind of human that you're a very considered person. You will look at things, you will figure it out, process it, see where it's going to go, and then assess the best path of action, and then be focused on getting it done.
Yep, that would be very accurate. And if you come in midway and you're like, I think we might be able to do better this way, it's like, you're overthinking it. We're on this path. We're going to go with it.
Yep.
You know what I mean? And so that's where I become less open-minded. But when in the middle of considering, like, where are we going to go? Yeah, like, I would say for this meeting, from my perspective for Klatch, like, everything's on the table. Like, so I'll have more questions about one. And the other thing, this is where I'm actually really bad. So I will be open-minded, but my face doesn't say open-minded. Because if you say something, I'm like, what?
Yeah, I've got like, the resting bitch face while I'm thinking too.
Right, and my face ends up one being like, why would you say something so stupid, is what it looks like. And it's like, I don't mean to, that doesn't mean to be my face, but it comes off as I'm asking, like, why would something so stupid come out of your mouth? And that was not what my intention was.
Yeah.
But if I'm caught off guard by an idea, sometimes I react that way. So I've been working on that.
Yeah, my mechanism for helping me along with that is to have a listening, smiling face.
Oh, yes, it's very good.
So I think a lot, obviously, but when I'm thinking, I appear to be like I hate everybody.
Yeah.
And all I'm doing is processing. Like,
right.
I'm taking what you're thinking, what you're saying, I'm extrapolating it into about 55,000 different directions and coming up with why it could work and it couldn't work, and apparently my face just shows the ones that can't work.
Yep.
And so people look at that and think, no, she hates the idea. I'm like, no, it's a great idea, let's do it. And people are like, but we would never have thought that from what your face said. Don't listen to my face.
Right. Listen
I'm
to my
thinking
words.
Right,
Yep.
So now I've learned I've just got to think with a smile and listen with a smile, and that helps people focus on the lipstick so that they think that I'm in a, I'm listening. How do you control it? Like, you just can't control what your brain is thinking, and It's going so quickly and processing so much that I'm like, my job as the person that's responsible for making the decisions is to hear what you've got to say and consider all the stuff that could be blind spots for all of us.
Speaking of lipstick, here's a great story. So I was in Asia like a decade ago, probably, doing some consulting for a company. And I wear red lipstick like once a month. Like, I don't wear it all the time, but like, I love it. I like putting it on. It's fun. And so I put it on one night when we were going out. And the next day, one of the girls that we were with was wearing her lipstick. I was like, oh, I like your lipstick. She's like, I was so inspired by your hooker look last night. I had to do it too. Like, oh.
That's fantastic.
Okay.
I am going to be proud the day someone says to me, I love your hooker look. Fuck yes. As an Arab Catholic girl that was raised to be feel guilty about everything, I hope at some point somebody tells me this is a hooker look. I'm aspiring to be like that.
That's pretty good. I'm like, how do you respond? I'm like, thanks, I guess.
Yeah. How do you respond to that?
Literally like that. Like, thanks? Like a hesitated thanks? Like, I didn't know. Is that a compliment? Or I don't know what that was meant to be, but sure. It's all good. Yeah.
I'm waiting for the day somebody says something like that to me. That will make my day. That will absolutely make my day. Can you just check if your headphone jack pulled out a little bit?
How's that?
No, all good.
Okay.
All good. It could be me. Oh, there you go. It was me who pulled it out. Tell me something with regards to leadership. I'm kind of trying to step away about talking about women in leadership, but I keep getting real back into it, and I've decided I want to take a different tact with regards to the discussion about women in leadership, in the sense that, do you focus on being a woman in leadership, or do you just see yourself as a person in leadership?
I see myself as a person in leadership. And I think more people would want me to look at myself as a woman in leadership, and it's just not my style.
No.
You know, it's just not. So yeah, you know, even like it's just not my style. For me, it's more of just a leadership thing. And you know, and I feel like I get what I need to out of most situations, but you know what I mean, regardless of where it is. Even a simple thing, it had kind of like with the competition and the gender bias thing and all of those pieces of it. It's like, yeah, don't you think you would have won in 2007 had you been a woman? Like, you were scored down for that. I was like, I just, you know, I don't know why it is. I just think he scored a little higher. And, you know, if you look at Carl Starr, him and I both got knocked down to the same things, and he's a guy and I'm a woman. I think I just lost because I lost. I don't look at it as that way. For better or worse, I'm not saying that that's the right approach. I know that, you know, championing that cause, because there are definitely times where that happens. It's just not my focus as far as that goes.
Yeah, I've been buried under the idea, like I get told, and I'm trying to move on from this. I'm working very hard at moving on from what I'm about to tell you. But I have been told more than a couple of hundred times in the last 4 or 5 years that if Elixir was owned by a man rather than a woman, the industry would have been much more accepting of it. God, I fucking choke up every time I think about it, even now. And it's things like that, like, it's not because I'm not smart. It's not because I'm not strategic or that I'm not hardworking or any of that. That's not the reason anyone gives me as to why the industry wasn't more accepting of Elixir. It's because I'm a woman. Yeah. And it's hard to swallow.
And like, does that resonate with you? Because when I've heard that, I'm just like, I just don't know if I buy that for some of my things, if that makes sense. And maybe it's because I don't want to look at it like that. Does that make sense? So I don't accept it because it's not what I want. It's like, no, and I don't know what the answer is, because I've gotten that on a few other things.
So you get it too, right? Like How do you? I've decided for me that I have to just move on from it, in the sense that I want to champion the idea of having more diversity. No problem. More diversity in all ways in leadership. Because, you know, in Ruth Bader, I never say her name right, Ruth Bader Ginsburg's words, you know, we've got to have more women in the rooms that are making decisions. But that's not just women, that's diversity in general. Yeah. And, you know, Beyonce says it as well, this idea of like the people who control the power or control the money, control the power. And, you know, for her, she's going to take the power. And she realizes to take the power, she has to make the money. Yeah. I think about that with regards to Elixir, and I'm like, you know what though? They're not saying it's not because they didn't have enough money. They're not saying it's because I didn't have enough smarts or any of that. They're saying it's because I was a woman. And I'm sorry, but I can't change any of that. Yeah. And if I can't change it, I'm not going to waste any more time on trying to fix it, because I'm not broken. If anything, this has made me more whole. And what I mean by that is it has made me look at me as a badass rather than someone who is flawed or crippled by her gender. I'm like, no, I'm not going to be crippled by the fact that y'all didn't jump on board with this because I'm a woman. I'm just going to find other people that will embrace this business. And you know what's resulted from that? We are fucking crushing it. Yeah. And if you don't want to get on board with what we're doing, fuck you very much. I'm not going to be deterred by this, because you are coming at me because of something I can't change. You're not coming at me and saying, you know what, Lee, I think that if you were more open-minded, and Lee, if you were less aggressive, or Lee, if you were smarter about it and welcomed more people into the business, or it did any constructive criticism about the way that this business was brought to market, any of it, right?
Yeah.
Then I could take that and I could learn from it.
Right.
But all I keep getting told is, if it was a woman, if it was a man, the industry would have been more accepting. And I know they're right. They're not lying. They're not wrong. They're not being deliberate assholes. It's shit that that's the truth. It's shit that that's the reality. But they're not incorrect.
Sure.
And that's the only thing I cannot change about any of this situation.
Yeah.
And so I've decided that what I want to do is focus on equality, not gender equality. You know, I want to find a way to get more people and do my part at getting more people in the room that can be representative of my customer base.
Yeah.
Because I don't owe anybody anything. I don't owe anybody any reasons for the way that I want to do things. I want to, in this business, in Map It Forward, I want to be a platform where we can talk about shit openly.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't have to be we're going to talk about shit right, or we're going to talk about it politically correct, or we're going to, you know, the number of people who have said, oh, I really want to come on your podcast, but we can't swear. There can't be any cursing. Fuck you. No.
Why?
You can't come on my podcast. Well, people have sticks up their asses. Yeah, well, that was the thing. I lost a friendship over it.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, like I want to come on your podcast, but I won't do it if you're going to swear. It's like, this is my house.
Right.
You're going to come into my house and tell me how the fuck I can talk? No, thank you very much. Well, it's unprofessional. You say fuck to me.
Your business though, so it's okay.
Well, the thing is, it's like this person would continuously say fuck in a conversation.
That's
as long as it wasn't right. And so you will say fuck in a conversation when we're just on the phone.
Right.
But in front of people, you won't.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's unprofessional. Well, I don't want you on my podcast. If you can't be on my podcast and be real.
Right, exactly.
There's no business, because the kinds of conversations that we want to have on this podcast are about the real way that people experience life in the coffee industry and in life.
Yeah.
And it's not easy. Being in business, being an employee at the moment is challenging in the coffee industry. It's, you know, for employees, when you see these wage transparency reports coming up, when you see, you know, the 2006 opening remarks that you had about millennials, is you specifically said in 2020, the majority of our workforce is going to be millennials, and the amount that they get paid is not going to be the major focus of what they are coming to work for, like what's going to determine whether they're coming to work for you. It's going to be like, how are you going to contribute to my life?
Yep.
And it's all actually transpiring now. And so we're facing a really interesting time in our industry where it's not easy being an employee in this industry either.
No.
Particularly because you've got business owners that have no business being business owners. We have to find a better way at helping people decide whether they should be business owners in the coffee industry. Our barrier to entry is so low that anyone can do it. And it's, to my mind, it's creating a global problem for our industry.
Huh. Is the barrier to entry low in Australia for cafe ownership as well?
Well, the only barrier to entry that's a difference between being a barista and being a business owner is money.
Right.
Other than that, what is it? Anywhere in the world. We don't have any kinds of certifications that hold you to a standard, or that prevent you from getting in. And you don't have to know how to read any financial statements. You don't know how to don't need to know how to balance books. You don't need to know how to build a culture. You don't need to know anything about the coffee supply chain.
Oh yeah, for sure.
You don't need to know anything about anything that matters and that could actually conspire to your success. And yet you're opening a business that is going to potentially compete with a business that has been there for a long time and that is either should be in business or should have closed a long time ago. But you are now showing up. You're going to employ people who also, the barrier to entry that they've taken to get into the industry is low, and they've never been taught anything about professionalism. They don't know how to speak to people. They've survived as long as they have purely because they're willing to put up with shit pay. Mm-hmm. It's so dysfunctional, Heather.
When you look at the coffee industry as a whole, though, like retail, you wonder, like, if you look at the economics of it, I think we are going to see a major shift in the next decade for a few reasons. I think, we talk about coffee prices and where those go. I think that's one side of the issue. And if we're talking about, if you look at the average coffee house, they profit, 10%?
If they're lucky.
Exactly. Okay. So you've got that. So if we're talking about you're going to pay more for your coffee, that's obviously going to come down from their 10%. And that then creates increased prices for consumers. And then the other piece of it that you look at is wages. Mm-hmm. Okay, so if wages go up as well, so that's another one that's going to take from 10, or going to result in higher cost again for consumers. I think we're going to hit a tipping point as to what consumers are going to pay. Like, consumers are paying $5 for a latte right now,
and they're screaming about it.
So what's the ceiling?
Exactly.
Because if we're all saying both ends of the supply chain need to get more, but we also know that the retailer is not exactly making, the retailer is not going to the bank with millions of dollars. The roaster is typically not going to the retailer with $1 million. It's like, this is kind of the economics of the supply chain. If it doesn't work for anybody, how much longer does this industry go on?
I think we have a branding problem in coffee. I think people talk.
There you are.
There you are. We could hear you and see you through the whole thing. It's all good.
Perfect. Branding. I lost you at, branding problem.
So I think, yes, we're experiencing a coffee price crisis, but I think at the core of the problem is a coffee branding crisis. And I don't mean in the industry, I mean in the public. I was listening to them talking on Rogan the other day about, fucking fancy coffees. Like, bro, it's just coffee. Like, right. Why does it cost more than 99 cents a cup? And I'm like, well, we have done a really shit job, particularly in this country, of branding coffee. Mm-hmm. Because in Australia, coffee is a ritual. And people will go and spend $5, $6 per cup 3 times a day. And it's still underpriced. It's severely underpriced. People are looking at about 3% margins in Australia. Okay. Which is terrifying.
Yeah.
3% is terrifying.
Right.
And so when I look at what we've got to do better here, what I think we need to be doing is we need to figure out how we're going to change the brand of coffee across the world.
Whoa.
Do you know what I mean?
So I think there's also a big problem here is there's no difference that coffee is coffee is coffee.
Right.
But it's not. And we know we know that it's not. So who's going to have that conversation? Who's going to draw the line between what specialty is and what specialty not? Who's drawing that line? Because right now, nobody's really willing to stake on it and say, here is the difference between the two. You are not drinking specialty coffee. You are drinking fancy coffee. You are drinking sweet coffee. You are drinking cheaply flavored coffee. Right. And, from the SCA, we've taken the perspective of, if we can, particularly with coffee price crisis, like right now we just need to support coffee as a whole. Like if we can support coffee, that's how specialty coffee is going to thrive. Because if there's no coffee, then there's no specialty coffee, right? But we're going to hit a point where it can no longer be just supporting coffee, because the reality is you're selling coffee that is paying living wages throughout the supply chain, and you are selling coffee that is not paying living wages throughout the supply chain for the exact same amount to the consumer. And how is the consumer ever going to know the difference?
Yeah, I agree. Just Do me a favor, tilt your laptop forward because you look like Tim Allen from... God, I missed that show.
Yes, I totally watched. That's so funny, yeah. Home Improvement.
Home improvements. So how do we start thinking about fixing it?
I don't know. I think part of I don't have a good answer for this at all. I look at, am I selling the same product as another big chain out there who's selling coffee for extremely similar prices? Nope, not in any way, shape, or form. But how can I genuinely distinguish that for the consumer?
But, and this is the really great contentious part about the idea of the brand of coffee.
Yeah.
You are selling the same thing.
And yet,
you're not.
Exactly. Right.
And this is where I think we have a brand crisis.
Yeah.
In that we haven't, same thing for this, right? Elixir.
Yep.
This is a coffee product. This is made from coffee and water. Same ingredients as an espresso.
Yep.
And yet this retails for $8 a bottle. And it needs to retail for $8 a bottle because we buy expensive coffee and we make our own water, and the packaging is ridiculously expensive and everything is hand done. And so when I'm thinking about these big issues with regards to our industry and our brand as coffee,
yep,
I'm trying to think about, like, how does the consumer see it? Would it be better for me to turn around and remove the word coffee from Elixir? Because I see it as a coffee product. You see your coffee as a coffee product, but yet how can we say your coffee is the same when you're selling it at $100 a cup to Pete's? It's not.
So a good analogy that I've heard, and I don't, it's funny because every time I hear it, it makes sense to me, but I'm never able to transfer it, is hamburgers.
Okay.
A McDonald's hamburger is a hamburger.
Yep.
An In-N-Out hamburger is a hamburger. A steakhouse hamburger is a hamburger. They're all hamburgers. They're all called hamburgers, and yet the price you would pay each of them is very different, and the product that you would get at them is fairly different, right? So it's like your coffee. They're all coffee, but the price point's different and the quality is different on all of them. And if you were to ask a consumer, like, what did you just eat? For all of them, they would say a hamburger, a hamburger, a hamburger, right?
But the difference is the beef industry has done a great job of separating out the different levels of specialty in beef.
But just by price. They haven't done it any other way.
Well, I wonder, like, bear in mind, I'm vegan, so if I talk about this in a less than intelligent way, you'll get what I mean.
Yeah.
In the sense that people recognize that a Wagyu beef steak it warrants you paying $200 a steak versus a lower cut. I don't know what a cheap cut of meat is.
But Wagyu beef, you see how often? I mean, you see it more often now, but it's still not something that you see all the time.
Right.
But we're going to say specialty coffee is accessible and you do see it all the time. And how often are you going to buy Wagyu beef as a customer, right? You're not going to buy Wagyu beef every night, but you're going to drink your coffee every day. So do we tell consumers, hey, Wagyu beef is equal to what specialty coffee is?
I don't know.
And then people stop doing it because it's too high priced. It becomes, you know what I mean? It can no longer be a daily habit.
How'd you get people to buy a cup of coffee for $100 a cup?
Luckily, it won at auction, and so we've got...
Fuck yeah, it did.
Well, I mean, honestly, without that story behind it, if I just put it up there for $100, it's not doing. But the limited supply of it, and the fact that it won at auction, and so it's got that backing behind it of being, hey, a legitimate, multiple people agree that this is the best coffee, helps to make it easier for sure.
And was it coffee people that bought it, or was...
No, it's everybody. So the people who buy the $100 cup, some are obviously coffee people.
Yep.
Some are food people. Like I'm somebody who's like, I'm a food person, so I will go to expensive restaurants. I will buy expensive wine. I do not do that all the time. Like I drink Costco wine on a daily basis or Trader Joe's wine. But at the same time, I also will splurge on wine, and I'll do my splurges on those because like I'm a food person, so my splurges are typically food splurges.
Yeah, wow.
That's who's buying the $100 cup as well, is those type of people.
And have you guys figured out how to signal them to let them know this is coming? You should get in on this?
Oh, yeah. We've got, we've put it through our PR agency to put it out there. And so we've got news coverage on it. And it's on our website. And so we put it out there through all of that. So, yeah, we're definitely putting it out there.
So people will say to me, like, how do we sell expensive coffees? And a lot of the time I'm saying to them, you can't always have it on offer.
Oh, right. Yeah.
It needs to be special.
Yes.
If you're going to have, this is not just something where you can turn around and buy a bag of coffee that's $500 a pound and be like, oh, we're always going to just put it on the shelf and expect it to move. There needs to be a campaign and a mechanism behind all of this. This is not just let's just see if it sells, because that's not going to work. And it needs to be a very special event, and you need to create events around it.
Yes.
Like we had the La Mustas guys on last week.
Yeah.
They're awesome. Yep. They're a part of they're a part of the hype machine behind their coffee. And, again, it takes a village. But that's the kind of thing that helps us change the messaging of the brand, right? That's still seen as the Wagyu of coffee.
Yeah.
But that's not, I feel like that's an easy sell.
Agreed.
Compared to the everyday problem that we have. Do you agree? Yeah.
100%. Yep. Even on our brew bar menu, like we typically have, we call it kind of our low, our medium, and our high option. And for most of the year, we have our entry level coffee, and then our next two are typically anywhere between $5 and $8 a cup. And that $8 cup is always so hard to sell. Yeah. Because it's more than you would spend on your normal everyday cup, but it's not so much that it piques your interest. So a $12 cup though always sells because it's like $12, and so there's questions about it, or a $20 cup or a $100 cup. But that like $8 price is the worst to price coffees that we've found, because it's just like, it's more than I want to spend for an everyday cup, but it's not enough to pique my interest. And so it's like, you have the $100 cup and the Wagyu beef cups, you have those out there, and those are great. But just like Wagyu beef is not the only good beef, you have Prime, USDA Prime, or whatever it may be, that is still really good quality. That's our specialty coffee. How do we fill in that market? Because that's what people are getting every day and drinking every day. How do you distinguish that?
Mark Dundon talks about it in the way of, he says, it confuses me because people will go out there and spend $13 on a beer.
Yep.
And it's cheaper to make beer.
That's crazy.
And I think he's right. And they'll go out and they'll buy 6 beers, 10 beers in a night.
Yeah.
And they won't have a problem, or over lunch.
Yeah.
But yet to ask somebody to pay an extra 50 cents for a coffee, they feel like we're fucking them over.
Yep.
And that's where I'm like, all right, that's where the core of the problem is. We have a problem with what we have sold coffee as a brand to the public as.
And you're fighting against it, honestly, for like the last 80 years.
Yeah.
I mean, coffee's always just been that cheap entry-level comfort item here in the U.S. So it's not even a recent problem. I mean, that comes from the history, coffee's history with the U.S. And that's where, Australia may have benefits, Italy may have benefits, because it's always been a perceived as a higher quality option, if you will.
With a ceiling.
And that's just not what we've had in the U.S. If you talk to older people, and I mean, I don't want to say generations are dying, but they kind of are.
Yeah,
but
they are.
Definitely right. I mean, it's happened, circle of life.
Hakuna Matata.
It's like I paid 5 cents for a cup of coffee. I got the red can, I got the blue can, and whatever it may be. And so you're starting to see a shift away from that, but you're still fighting. We always are still fighting on the industry, like, what do we price our 12-ounce cup of coffee at? Like, that's the number one discussion amongst a lot of retailers. Lattes have a higher perceived value. So you're seeing those at that $4.50, $6 mark, and then there's less pushback. But that black cup of coffee is where you constantly see that's that tipping point one, that where are we going to get consumers on that cup of coffee? And Because I would talk to, say, most retailers out there, their cost of their margins are the lowest on their black cup of coffee.
Right.
Their margins are fine on their milk drinks and everything else. The black coffee is where they get killed.
I think, as we're talking it out here, the thing that I'm thinking is a real problem is that we call it all coffee. So right. We call instant coffee. Mm-hmm. We call the espresso-based thing that we do coffee. We call batch brew coffee. We call the Wagyu version of it coffee.
Yeah.
And because it's all coffee, to the person who doesn't understand, I'm constantly blown away by the fact that people don't know that coffee comes off a tree.
Oh, I believe that, yeah.
And we've done and when I say we, it's not our responsibility, it just rests on our laurels now. We've done a terrible job at educating the general public about what we mean by coffee. Mm-hmm. And the fact that, like beef, there are different types of coffee and there are different reasons for paying more, and you get what you pay for.
Right.
And if we don't start thinking about how we're going to change that messaging, perhaps we, combined with climate change and combined with the coffee price crisis and the misinformation that's out there and people leaving coffee farms because it's no longer profitable to have their coffee farms that have been in their families for generations, perhaps we may miss the boat.
See, and this is where I would have to disagree with you, is I think Wagyu, you don't have to say beef, right? You say Wagyu, and people typically know you're talking about that. So I feel like we're on our way towards there with geisha.
Uh-huh.
We're not there, and it's definitely more of a coffee world thing. So, if I was to say geisha to my grandparents, they would have zero idea what I'm talking about. So we're
going back to hookers.
Yeah, exactly. I like what I like. What can I say?
I'm detecting a theme, woman.
Right. Okay, so we've got that high-end level done, right?
Yep.
And then we're talking about with the other areas, like you get what you pay for.
Yeah.
But the problem is I think with coffee, you don't. You are paying a lot for inferior products quite often that are covered up with a bunch of other stuff. And that's, to me, the problem that coffee has.
Well, it's definitely one of them.
Right. As far as that branding piece and how you can separate it out, it's like, well, I'm paying $4.50 whether I go here or whether I go here. They're the same thing, right? No, those are a lot of times are not the same thing.
No. And the interesting thing about it, and I mean, we're going deep here, but we need to, it's one of those things where the disparity is coming from the idea that it still costs $15 per hour or whatever you're paying for your staff.
Yep.
All the expensive shit is happening on this end of the supply chain.
Right.
And people are happy to make the sacrifices when they do need to cut some of the fat from the complex, the other side of it.
Right.
And so I don't know how we fix that.
Yeah.
It's one of those things of, well, the reason that both of those cups are costing the same is because that's the cheapest part of the whole process. Mm-hmm. But without it, we have no industry.
Right.
I'm desperate to figure out a solution for it, but it just logically in my own mind about what's the silver bullet here? When Merlin Presa came on the podcast, she said, listen, as smallholder producers of commercial grade coffee, all we need to see as the producer is an extra 1 cent per cup making its way down to the producer, and we fix this problem. And I said to her, yes, but that means at least an extra 25 to 50 cents per cup on the front end.
Right.
For you to get an extra 1 cent. That's not going to wash. Imagine.
It's crazy. I was talking to traders a few years ago, importers and exporters and traders, and they were talking about how, with some of their big customers, they're talking, they're arguing over 1/100 of a penny on price and buying futures at 1/100 of a penny at high or low. And I'm like, that's insane to me that we're talking about that level, because it took me a while to grasp my head around what, it's like, well, I don't understand why this problem is, and this was 10 years ago. This is, I was having this conversation where I couldn't understand why it wasn't just so easy to get them more, but it's exactly what you just said. In order to get them a penny from a lot of these places, it's 25 to 50 cents more from the consumer.
And that's where I got to this idea that perhaps it's a branding problem, because for us to convince the general public that they need to pay an extra 50 cents for a commercial cup of coffee, or for a cup of coffee, whether it's commercial grade or specialty, there would be an outrage.
It's funny because as much as you say that, they like minimum wage laws, right? So minimum wage is going to go up in California $1 for the next 3 years. It's been going up. And what happens every single year? We raise prices. Like, no, like you have to raise prices to cover it, right?
Yeah, and my nothing statement is it's not like people are leaving the industry. People are leaving going to coffee shops.
Yes.
That's what I mean by nothing. People are still continuing this habit. So, and again, we do it because we're forced to do it as business owners.
Right.
But to do it and to take the risk of doing it because we want to pay more for the coffee, that's a bigger part of the bullet to bite.
Oh, for sure.
Why do you think we couldn't do it?
I just think there are too many other economic factors at play for, you know what I mean, for the entire thing. I think the reality is, you know, and this is talking, it's so interesting. So I've been having a lot of these types of conversations, obviously. Sure. And, you know, 80% of coffee in the US is sold through 3 primary companies. Okay. So you take them out of it. What is the specialty coffee that we're talking about, right? And so we talk about it's 10%. I mean, 10% of consumers get their coffee from what we would consider kind of a specialty. And so it's a really, really difficult, I think, for a lot of us in these rooms to have these conversations, because I think the reality is, it's like, I can't even fathom the way that they do business. No. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sure.
The solutions are so freaking obvious. Right? Yep. But it doesn't translate to that level of scale and that level of business and that level of economies. And yeah, I mean, on a good note, you have shareholders saying things like, hey, it's not just about, you know, the shareholder price at the end of the quarter. Like there are things that are more important than just that share. You're starting to have those conversations at the corporate level. But you know how many things within all of those companies are fighting for that piece of that's no longer going there? It's not like, you know, even within a coffee company, if you were to have that conversation, it's not just the producer that's fighting for that. It's the wages inside. It's, you know, I mean, there's so many other factors within coffee. You don't want to talk about dairy. Like the dairy industry is a huge vital part of our economy, right? So like they're fighting for their piece. I mean, there's so many other pieces that are fighting for that little extra that you're getting. I think I think the most difficult part about this conversation within the specialty community is like we can do our part.
But it has zero net effect.
We don't make the decision. Correct. We don't control the market.
No.
Like we just don't.
And this is why I think that we fix the coffee price crisis if we take on board the very difficult challenge of fixing the coffee brand crisis.
Right. Yep.
Because we can't affect the big 5.
Right.
That are responsible for the 50% of coffee that's purchased in the world. The only way that we can have any chance at doing a dent, because just fixing specialty, we're not the problem.
Right.
For the majority of it, we're a tiny slice of it.
And it's not a pompous thing to say, it's just the reality of it. It's like if you look at most of the specialty players, it's like, you know, and there's some exceptions obviously, but we're not necessarily and there's things that we could be doing differently and better.
For sure.
But I also get to the point where it's like, we're also not going to make a dent.
It's not going to move the needle.
Right.
It's the majority of Americans and all over the world, the majority of people are drinking Nescafe at home. I had someone on the podcast from Nescafe, and I think that if I could remember correctly, 6,000 cups per second.
Wow.
Is what Nestle sells.
Wow. That's crazy.
Like to get your head around it is a mindfuck. Right. 6,000 cups per second is what Nestle's responsible for. I'm sorry, but $100 a cup is not going to do anything when that happens.
It's not.
And so this is what brings me back to this idea of we can sit here on this podcast and have these conversations. You can have these conversations at RICO or at SCA, at the expos, or at any of this kind of stuff. But if we have people getting into business in coffee that have no concept of these issues, if we have people opening roasteries that don't know how to read contracts of the coffee that they're buying, they don't understand the cost of production versus the cost of doing business for these farmers. If they don't understand these things, perhaps they have no business of getting into business. But having said that, I also don't want to stifle anyone's opportunity to make their fortune anywhere in the supply chain.
Sure.
And so, I say all this stuff with a whole bunch of no answers.
Well, and the other interesting thing, though, is it's like, even if you look at what you just said, the difference is, and here's how you can have success on the other end of the spectrum. So if you're going to get into the coffee business, is it more important that you understand business or that you understand coffee?
Both.
To be successful, you got to kind of understand business. Business
totally.
is just business. Do you know what I mean?
But,
to a certain extent.
Right. And a lot of people are getting into business not knowing what a profit and loss statement is.
Right.
So they don't know the business side of it. They know the coffee side of it. And I guess when I talk about, for me, and when I'm talking with clients particularly about what do they know about coffee, it's never how to make a V60 or an espresso.
Right.
When I'm talking about people, what do you understand about coffee? It's what is your buying philosophy? Mm-hmm. How are you connected to a buying philosophy? What's the messaging behind what you understand about coffee and the value chain, and how you're messaging that to your customers so that you can start building a relationship between what they're purchasing and how it relates to what your buying habits are, how your buying habits are going to be affected.
Right.
Because you're contributing to economy on two different directions.
Yep.
And that's the kind of what do I know about coffee conversation that I want people to be having, because to me that is business. That is an integral part of the business. If you don't understand how to forecast correctly, your coffee's going to go bad, and then you're going to throw that away and you're never going to buy that coffee from that producer again. But you are fucking with their future if you don't understand how to do that.
Yeah, for sure.
It's one of those things of honestly, I mean, 18 years in the industry, and it wasn't until I had this podcast that I really started to dive deep into the understanding of what it means to be a coffee producer and the serious challenges that they're facing. But at the same time, cafes are experiencing and roasters experiencing the same kinds of challenges.
Oh, yeah.
It's no different. Like, both extremes of the supply chain are experiencing the same challenges, I think, because of the same problems. The barrier to entry is so low for both.
Interesting, yeah.
It's the middle part that has a really high barrier to entry. And they seem to be doing better than most.
Being the roaster?
No, I consider the roaster on the end.
Who's your middle part?
The people who are moving it around the world.
Yeah.
They don't make massive amounts, but they have liquidity.
Yeah.
And that's the part of it that is powerful. I'm still trying to answer the question, who's making money in coffee? And no matter how much research we're doing, and I've hired an investigative journalist to help me with this.
I mean, isn't the answer to it kind of just like you were talking about with Beyonce? You know what I mean? To those who have the power make the money. I mean, you legitimately have a few companies at top that are doing it at massive scale, that control the economy, that are making the money. You know, and the rest of us are lucky we're taking home our 10% at the end of the day, and that's kind of where the industry lies. I think it was different. 20 years ago, I think when you didn't have so much control in one area, you probably had things more spread out. And we can say that, but the reality is you still had baristas making the low end, and you still had producers very much at the mercy of whatever the C happens to be. But I do think consolidation is, in most places, consolidation is just bad for business. We're seeing consolidation on the producing end. We're seeing consolidation on the consuming end.
For sure.
You consolidate power, you kind of lose, any control that you may have had.
And so what I'm thinking as I'm hearing you say that is perhaps coffee is the commodity that is a consequence of other economies of scale. And so, and what I mean by that is coffee happens to be a mechanism for these consolidated powers to purchase land and to that coffee is grown on, and to shift money around to at really high interest rates for a lot of coffee producers. Like there are the actual money is being made on the way you do business in coffee, not on actually coffee.
I have not heard that before, but it makes sense.
I'm thinking out loud.
Right.
But
I mean, I've always
sense.
heard like McDonald's is not a hamburger company. McDonald's is a real estate company.
Right. And that's what I'm thinking.
Who's to say that that's not the case? Yeah. I've never heard that argument or like that theory even, but I don't think it's by any means unreasonable.
Because when you start to try and dissect who's making money in coffee, I've had traders on here. I've had importers and exporters. I've had producers. I've had, cafe owners and roasters and everyone in between. And everyone's telling me that the people who seem to be making the biggest amount is somebody else.
Right. I was like, I guarantee you nobody's been on your podcast being like, I'm raking in the cash over here in coffee.
And when I speak to people who are making money in coffee, they're not making money in coffee. They're making money on like the rent that one of their companies is earning from one of the other companies that they have paying. So it's a real estate thing. Right. And it hasn't been until this conversation that I've been starting to integrate all of these pieces. And I'm like, well, actually, fuck. I don't think anyone's making... It seems to be that the people that are making money are the people who are charging producers 50% on their loans.
Right.
And the investment companies that are going in and buying big blocks of land, putting coffee on them and selling them to another holding company that they've got, or to another company that is a part of their big group. And so that company ends up paying them rent. I don't know what this new kind of thought pattern is going to...
I think it gives your investigative journalists a new angle for sure.
Yeah, but what do we do with it? That's the thing for me. And we keep saying that, like... What happens when we figure this stuff out? Like, let's say we figure out that everyone's losing in coffee. Right? When you think about it, a coffee shop isn't making money off coffee. It's making money off community. It's a service industry. We're making money off the service. Anyone who's delusional into thinking that they make money off coffee is just that delusional. There's not enough of a margin in it. But what happens if we decide that the net result of the coffee industry is that everybody's losing or making almost enough that it's not worth being in business for?
Well, I mean, I think to an extent, I don't want to say you're there with it because nobody's making a ton of money and yet coffee's growing.
Okay, you have to dissect that for me. I get that it's growing, but what do you mean by it's growing? More people are drinking coffee.
More people are drinking coffee and way more people are selling coffee. I mean, think of how easy it is to walk outside your house, your office, whatever it may be.
It's not a good thing.
And how quickly you can get a cup of coffee right now.
And go on.
Yeah, no, so you have the increased competition, which is good because in theory people should be doing better, but you also have the increased competition, so everybody's now trying to... Yeah, exactly.
And do you see it as a positive thing or a potentially dangerous thing for our industry?
Oh, man. I really struggle with where to go. For me, I really liked your brand positioning that you were going with because I don't mind that there's an oversaturation. What I mind is that the consumer can't tell the difference between what all of those are. That, for me, is the really big miss for us as an industry is we sell so many different products as the exact same thing. And I do think that has to get dealt with in the next few years.
Do you think it's something that SCA could or should be focusing on?
I think in the next few years, if the SCA wants to see specialty coffee survive, they will have to draw a line on what specialty coffee is. It's something that we've been really sensitive to do, and we're very thoughtful about, because if you get 4 people in a room, you have 4 different definitions of specialty
Totally.
coffee. If you get 18 people in a room, you get 18 different definitions of what specialty coffee is, right? So, and the SCA is really working towards kind of an inclusivity on, like, hey, let's worry about coffee, because if we can take care of coffee, specialty coffee will thrive out of that. And I think what you're going to see is, if you just continue to call it all coffee, specialty coffee will die.
Yep.
Because why do I need it? It's all coffee.
7-Eleven is championing that with their 99-cent cup that's specialty coffee.
Exactly. If we do not draw a line in the sand and really promote it, I think you will end up with an oversaturation of mediocre coffee sold as specialty coffee, and you will lose specialty coffee for that reason. So, like, right now we're worried about the producers losing it, right? I think we're going to come close to consumers losing specialty coffee.
Yeah.
Because everybody's selling specialty coffee and it becomes a price market.
I'm really glad you're the president.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna tackle this. It's right on the top of my list.
It's the only thing that you've got to do in all of and it's going to happen just like that. Just like that, really easy. I mean, the challenges that I see there, and I think it's wonderful that that's the direction that you as the president is thinking, and that SCA as an organization is thinking.
Yeah.
But therein lies the core problem of what the fuck is specialty.
Correct.
And then who gets to define it? How do you go about the business of getting an industry on board with whatever your definition is?
Right. And so you can imagine how political that's going to be.
Oh, for sure.
And that becomes, I don't want to say it's the reason we don't tackle it, because that's not totally fair, but there is no definition. And when you have an organization like the SCA where you have so many different people involved, and you work towards inclusivity, are you now going to draw a line and be exclusive and be like, you don't get to play in our industry because we're going to call it out and you're not going to be defined as specialty? I don't think that's what we're looking to do either. I do think, and Rick Reinhardt has been a proponent for the past year or two, is saying a product that is specialty, you cannot call a product specialty if people cannot survive on it. If the people who are producing the product cannot survive on it. So if you are not paying a living wage and you cannot sell that product as specialty. In order to call something specialty, it has to take care of everybody in the supply chain.
That's a great...
Yeah. Who's going to say no to that? Right? Like, what consumer is going to be like, I don't want to pay people. I think living wages is too much. I don't want people to be able to live off of this product.
Well, I guarantee you that most people at either end of the spectrum is totally on board with that.
Exactly. Totally. Are we going to, do we want to, because I do think we are past the point in the SCA of calling specialty a green score. I think that is something that is like, no, there's a green score for quality, and that's an important, we still support that, but that is not what specialty coffee is.
No.
That is a score that green coffee is graded on, and that is a quality piece.
That's one element.
Of that raw product. Exactly. That is one element of that raw product. But, if you want to call a finished product specialty, everybody who's been involved in working up to that point should be able to survive off of that product. And if that is not happening,
have you guys
describe it that way?
Have you guys branded, trademarked specialty coffee?
I know Specialty Coffee Association. I believe Specialty Coffee, but I'm not 100% sure.
One way you could do this is if you trademarked specialty coffee and then required a standard of people to have to, a checklist, something, you have to be able to read financial statements. You have to be able to, like, if you defined what specialty coffee was then and then allowed people, the only way you can use this is if you meet a standard.
I'm going to say specialty coffee is not trademarked because it's too general of a term. If Kylie Jenner can trademark Rise and Shine, I am sure as hell going to trademark specialty coffee, because I don't think she will. But either way, I do think, as I'm thinking about it, like thinking of everybody who uses specialty coffee, there's no way we have a trademark on that. It's got to be something where it's too general. It's too commonly used.
It's worth asking somebody about.
I'm going to give us the benefit of the doubt and say that we have, but I'm going to double check. I am going to shoot off an email to make sure we have, but I can't imagine that hasn't happened.
I'm just thinking, like, we need to figure out a way to separate ourselves out as a brand from coffee.
Yeah, right.
And like I said, we're not going to be able to, changing the supply chain isn't going to happen.
Right.
We have to have a completely different approach to the way that we try and fix this problem.
I would very much so agree with that.
And then you add the idea of automation into this.
Right, which we haven't even talked about.
Like, that's a whole nother level of weird fucked upness that's about to enter the paradigm. And it's interesting from the perspective of, like, you see all these wage transparency spreadsheets popping up everywhere. You see, I'm getting contacted by loads of business owners that are like, I'm just so sick of this shit. I just want robots to make everything now. I'm going to just keep my best people and I just want to find robots that will do. And it's not unreasonable.
Right.
Because
I see both sides of it clearly, very easily. Yes.
Totally. These are
people. I think it's going to become a thing where I don't think anybody is sick of it. Does that make sense? Like, it's from a business owner's perspective. I don't think we're coming at it from that angle, but I do think what we're coming at it as is, here's how much I can sell a cup of coffee for. I have hit the peak. I would love to pay you more. I would love to pay you $30. The economics of coffee do not support it. And I think we have to start positioning it that way. Because, from an owner's perspective, it sucks to say, I want robots to make my coffee. I just am sick of this shit. But as a business owner in retail, I see our payroll, and we absolutely have goals that are all of our managers have to hit. You know what I mean? As a company, we have payroll goals that we have to hit because we have to be a sustainable business also. Like, if I can pay you $30 for a month, and then we're all out of money and we're all out of jobs. So right now, I'm going to pay you what I can pay you, and and hopefully it's enough. And there's never going to be a job that anybody is in life where they're like, yeah, I'm totally getting paid what I'm worth.
Yeah.
Ever, right? If we put it at $30, our barista's going to go home and be like, I'm getting paid what I'm worth. Like, that just doesn't happen with jobs to an extent.
To an extent, I remember, like, that $30 an hour was on average what I was getting paid as a barista in Australia. And I remember thinking, but again, I had the context of having worked in the corporate world. And so when I got into coffee, I couldn't fucking believe that somebody was paying me anything to do this job. I was like, this is the shit. I get paid good money to socialize and to make coffee all day. This is real? This is a job? And then as I got better and better at it and got really great at customer service and, building a customer base for my employers, I could not believe the amount of money that they were prepared to pay to make this happen. But here we don't have that. Right. The amount of money that we're paying people here is barely survivable.
Right.
In California particularly. Like, the cost of living here is really expensive.
Yeah.
And a lot of the baristas that I know, they don't get to eat outside of work. Because they can't survive on the tips.
Right.
That's no way for us to have an industry. We don't want to have an industry where that's the case. So I see that side of the argument. I really do. But at the same time, like, your payroll thing is so on the money about that. On top of that, though, is we as business owners have a certain bandwidth that we can allocate to. This is the amount of bandwidth I have to spend on my interpersonal interactions with my employees. And this is how much bandwidth I have to commit to having to deal with the financial elements of my business, and with dealing with suppliers, and with having to think about how, the strategic side of growing my business. Right. There's only a certain amount of bandwidth any amount of people have. And so if everything's getting too hard and everything's getting a bit too much, and I'm at 3% year-on-year net profit. I'm probably going to look for some easy wins. And the low-hanging fruit a lot of the time for a lot of these business owners is, I need to get back some of my bandwidth because my mental health is suffering. I'm stressed all the time. And if I can replace a couple of my employees with machines that aren't going to bitch at me, maybe I should just do it.
Right. You know, one of the other topics that I think is an uncomfortable topic to have, but I think that we're going to start having is workplace customer service. I mean, we're getting to a point where, you know, I have employees. It's like, I'm not in the mood to smile today. It's like, then you cannot work today.
Yeah,
like this
exactly.
is customer service. We look people in the eye, we smile. And it's like, you know, it's a really slippery slope that we're on with that. It's like, nope, there is actual defined customer service standard that I will put. And if you don't like it, you by no means have to work for me. But if you are going to work for me,
you will smile.
What I expect. Yes. You know, and
we had to teach someone, this was fantastic. We literally had to do smiling classes for an employee once.
Yeah.
And I would say to the owner, I'm like, you know, like we can just move her along. If you have to teach somebody how to smile, perhaps this is the wrong industry.
Yeah.
You know, when customers are coming in and asking, is she suicidal? Perhaps this is not the right industry for this person. And this is what I say to like people who think that they're doing everyone a favor by giving good customer service. It's your fucking job. Right. You're not doing.
It's also a job where it's like you should genuinely enjoy people. Like if you do not wake up and it's like, oh, I want to go out and talk to people. Like don't apply to work around people. Like there are office jobs for people like you. Go get one of those.
Yeah, and you know, if you've reached a point in your career where you hate people now, that's possible. Like, you know, political times have changed and there's reasons that there's a lot of people that are shit and you want to keep away from them. You can pivot in your career. Go 100%. Work in an office in coffee. You can become a green buyer and get on the trajectory of learning how to become a green buyer or an operations manager or work in logistics or something like that where you don't have to be customer facing. But you are so right about this customer service thing with regards to that and generations.
Yeah.
That said everything, Heather.
Oh, yeah.
Talk to me.
It just, I mean, you know, when you're in customer service, you serve multiple generations and they do not know how to talk to each other. You know, it's like you have an old man who comes in and he walks up to the counter. He's like, hey, sweetie, I'll take a coffee. And the girl's just like, you can't call me sweetie. You know, it's like, oh my gosh, guys, like everybody just take a breath. It's okay. We're all just going to take a breath.
Or they didn't use the right gender pronoun.
These are real discussions that business owners are dealing with. So when you look at it, it's like, I kind of want the easy way out. Like this is, as a business owner, above my pay grade. I mean, HR people are like the most valuable people in the world right now in a company. Yeah.
How do you get the, how do we find middle ground, do you think? Do you think that it's something that's doable?
I don't know. You know, this is like when you had asked about like that open-mindedness. Like I can see both sides of it and I can appreciate both sides of it. And I rarely to never get offended on those pieces of it. You know what I mean? Like I can walk in and a guy can call me honey and I blow it off. To me, it's not a big deal. I just don't care. It's fine.
Pick your battles, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, whatever. I just don't care enough to engage in it, if that makes sense. It's not a positive. It's not a negative. It's what it is. So as far as like what that middle ground is, like if somebody's genuinely, it's like, no, I'd actually prefer, I completely respect that if they were to say, actually, I prefer if you didn't call me honey, my name is Sarah, whatever, maybe. It's like, oh, no problem. And if the man should respond and say, oh, I'm so sorry, no problem. And that should be the end of it. But people can't talk like that.
No.
Like we have an issue, real life. So we have an employee right now who we had another employee who worked for us, and he would see her, he would hug her. And he's a hugger, okay? So she sends me a message and she's like, hey, I'm really uncomfortable with this hugging. And so I'm like, okay, well, have you told him? She's like, no, I don't want to make it awkward. I'm like, so do you think if I tell him it will be less awkward? Like, you
I'm
have to be
so
really
glad you bring this up.
Okay, for you to say, I'd rather not, oh, I'm not a hugger. Can you not hug me? Just, if you say it like that, that is not awkward. Me having to pull him into a meeting to say, so I've had to have a different conversation because there's been a complaint. That is now crazy awkward. And nobody wins in this, because
Right.
every time you see him, you're going to feel awkward knowing that you put it, it's just like, versus all you have to do is say, hey, I'm actually not a hugger. Can we not hug? And he would say, oh my God, I'm so sorry. No problem.
Yeah.
But you have to be able to say that. Like, I think the reason we can't find middle ground is because people don't know how to have a conversation.
I'm so glad you bring this up. So for me, the silver bullet in our industry around all of this is assertiveness training. Mm-hmm. Which is why we just ran a huge workshop in Australia, full day on assertiveness training with a psychologist. We've recorded it. We're going to make it available as an online course.
That's awesome.
So that people can understand the difference between aggressive behavior, passive behavior, the relationship that boundaries have when it comes to those kinds of things, how to recognize when somebody is walking over your boundaries and when you're letting people walk all over your boundaries. Yeah. And when you are inviting people to that, and that's a perfect example of somebody who is inviting somebody else to passively participate in walking all over their boundaries.
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, she's being aggressive by being passive.
Right.
And so when we did this training, the people that showed up said, oh shit, my whole life is going to change after this.
Yeah.
Because we've taught them that assertiveness is not aggressive. Assertiveness is where you want to be. Because assertiveness is taking into consideration what your own boundaries are, what other people's boundaries are, how to detect when anyone's boundaries are being walked over, whether you're doing it or they're doing it, and the actions that can be taken to rectify that situation. I think that we need to get assertiveness training for everybody in the industry.
I would also put it as so I love that. And I think that's great. And that's something we work on. But the other half of that as well is how to receive feedback.
Right.
So that's the other piece. It's like a lot of people are not used to getting feedback. I mean, you look at it in
it's a generational thing too.
It is. I don't want to say the millennial or Gen Z, but
it's there. We're both Gen Xers. So.
Like batting for their kids at school over everything. I mean, we just had somebody call in. It was nonsense. Like, if your mom calls me, I am not talking to her. Like, that is a hard and fast rule. I refuse to have that conversation. Like, stop it now. But it is something where we tell people at the beginning of their time with Klatch, it's like, so you are going to get feedback every single day. And every single day, you will probably be told something that you did not do well. And that's okay. We are telling you because we want to make sure that you're aware that this can be done better. And we want you to improve. We want you to be here with us long term. And for some people, that whole, but I know your standard's wrong. That's cute, but no, you actually didn't do it well.
Yeah, this is why I'm a big advocate of pushing people to do hard things.
Yeah.
Yep. And I lose a lot of employees because of it, because they feel very uncomfortable. And I'm like, that's okay. You need to move on then. Right.
And it's like, I like you as a person, but you need to clean the bathroom better. Like, no, there's still pee on the toilet. Like, that needs to be done better. That's just part of what we have to do. I think we did it well enough. It's like, no.
Yeah, well enough isn't done. And I know that we sound like really harsh people. And, you know, if a guy was to say this, he'd be just a guy if we're saying it, we're bitches. But I'm okay with that because I'm shifting a standard here.
Yeah.
The reason I encourage people, whether they work for me or don't, like I mentor 7 people around the world and I consult to lots of businesses. And a whole big, massive part of that is teaching them how to get comfortable with the discomfort of doing hard shit.
Yeah.
It is the only life teacher that's going to teach you without an agenda.
I think that's great.
And I wish we could find a way to make it like a part of the curriculum of being in the industry.
Yeah. And that's so big for everybody. I like my biggest advice is, one, like, feedback is not bad. It does not mean somebody does not like you. It does not mean that you're a terrible person. Like, you should constantly be asking for genuine feedback from people on like, hey, what can I do better? Because you're going to feel better knowing where it's like, oh, wow, look, I'm improving in whatever it may be. This doesn't even have to be an employer thing. It's like, what can I do better as a friend? Have you asked that question? And if your friend was like, I actually really like if you would text me more often. Like, how much more genuine is your guys' friendship?
How can I show up? Yeah.
Like that would be so valuable, but people don't do that. And a friend would never say like, "Hey, I really need you to I really need you to text me more." Like people are not doing that just in life right now. And I think that's such a big part of where we can all continue to improve. I think, people are going to interfere with your boundaries because I think boundaries are so all over the page right now, and not a bad way. I'm not saying anybody's boundaries are wrong. That's fine wherever yours are. But because everybody's are so different, I do think there's not, it used to be a standard boundary.
Yeah.
And that's a bad place to be, for sure.
Yep.
So I think it's great that people have these individual ones, but you can't expect people to necessarily know them. So you have to be okay being assertive and telling what your boundaries are.
And learn how to be assertive.
Yeah. And then for the people hearing them, you have to be able to hear, it's like, oh, wow, I apologize. I will absolutely respect that. And then you guys both can be able to move on, and you can still talk and be friends, and life will be good for everybody.
And it actually brings you closer. It makes a team more solid. Oh,
yes.
For sure.
Because now everybody's being genuine around each other.
Do you think that we're being idealistic? This is a question that I ask myself a lot with regards to this stuff, because this week I gave somebody some feedback about, and granted, I didn't have to. This is a very popular movement on social media at the moment that I gave the feedback to. It's in the coffee industry. They had posted some memes that were really bitchy and were targeted at a particular business. Mm-hmm. And I reached out to them and said, hey guys, you're better than this. It comes off as bitchy and as petty doing this, right. And I think you could do better. Man, they came back and like, I'm really triggered by what you've just said. I feel diminished. I feel that, you're diminishing my experience that I had. And I'm like, where the fuck did all of this come from? And then I thought, am I being idealistic? Like, am I being what when I was a kid I used to look at like the old people are doing? Am I being like too hopeful that we can expect more of ourselves and of each other?
No, I think it takes people like you and me to force everybody else to be better. No, but I do think it genuinely, like, yeah. I think we are in a very tricky time. I do think there's so much that has happened and people just don't know how to respond. And I think the political climate doesn't help, right? So I think there's so many factors that are really big. I think the more that we can get people out of their comfort zone, and be okay out of their comfort zone. Yes, it's probably idealistic, but I still think it's what we should aim for. I think it's what's going to set people up better for the future, what's going to set society up better. It's going to help them in their long-term careers of, wanting to achieve anything and being able to have workplace relationships and relationships with customers and so on.
When people say to me, why do you bother, Lee? Like, you don't have to be doing this, having these conversations and challenging these ideals. Well, because you know what's going to happen? These people can make it really nice and easy for themselves. And to use that word that you were saying, it's nice and cute to have.
Right.
But at some point, these people are going to hit the very first terribly hard thing that happens to them in their life. And they're going to fall apart.
Right.
And I don't want that for anybody.
Yeah.
If they can learn how to do hard shit in increments, it will better prepare them for the very first devastating thing that happens to them that puts them so hard on their ass that they can't have no chance from recovering.
Yeah.
And so when people say to me, can you tell me why I need to fucking high five every barista that makes an espresso now? Like, why is that a thing? Like, because you're allowing that to happen. Just because they want you to high five them, it doesn't mean you have to.
Right.
You're paying them to do that. And I think we're in great times for the idea of we're challenging so much. We're challenging so many norms about gender fluidity and about where women sit on the spectrum and where men sit on the spectrum and, pay gaps and equality and, fairness and all. I think it's wonderful. I think that not having, I want to use a whole bunch of words that are completely inappropriate there, but the idea of not having any kind of end game to where we're trying to get to. Like, you can't turn around and think it's reasonable to say that when an old man walks in and says, "Hello, honey," it's unreasonable for you to not consider this man's perspective and his context. Mm-hmm. And if all we're saying as a certain generation, if they're saying, no, everybody has to get onto our page, well, hello, fuck you. Sorry, I don't know how to force this old man to call you they.
Right.
When nobody's sat down and explained to him why it's important to you. And you don't have the time on bar to be the person that has that conversation with him. I think that SCA moving forward has a very interesting challenge ahead of it when it comes to these issues. Do you agree?
Oh, for sure. Yes. I mean, we have a whole section of the association kind of dedicated to this because it's such a big topic and such a big issue, and it's a fine line. I mean, we do have the SCA is full of young people who come from a lot of these generations and represent a lot of these values, and they're important. They're incredibly important to us. But it is also a matter of now we also have a ton of cultural differences, and we saw that with the Dubai issue. I mean, Dubai issue with the association, that was not, in the U.S. there was one clear voice. That was not the case with the rest of the world.
No.
And
it shocked me. I'm like,
there were a lot of people in the U.S. who were not receptive to that other way of thinking and just immediately just like pushed aside. It's like, well, it's wrong. It's like, okay, so we actually, you can't say that because they're over there saying the exact same thing about you, and that dialogue is going to get all of us nowhere.
Yeah, nobody listens to anybody.
Right.
It never struck me to ask you about this, but I'm going to ask it now. Have you guys thought about Portland and what's going on in Portland and with Antifa and the fact that, do you know about this?
I don't know. I don't know if I want to know.
Antifa are the white extremists.
Yeah.
They're on the other side.
Correct. Yeah. I don't think that we have had them come up as an issue yet.
Well, there's a lot of rioting and shit that's going on, like from a physical violence perspective in Portland, like on a very regular basis. I'm going to send you a podcast.
Yeah.
That Andy No, who is a journalist, went on Rogan and had a conversation about it, and I was fucking shocked to hear that this was going on. And I'm like, but shit, we've got SCA in Portland next year,
right,
and these protests are happening on a weekly basis, and a lot of them
we haven't heard anything from that. Like, one thing that we're actually much better at is talking to like local communities, because funny enough, the bigger deal that's been on our radar is Poland. Because World of Coffee is going to Poland 3 months after Portland.
What's going on in Poland?
So in Poland, there's a new government that came into place that was talking about passing LGBT-free zones.
Excuse me?
Correct. So...
Wow, I just got chills.
Yeah. And so that's actually been bigger on our radar and a bigger conversation that we've been having. Portland hasn't come up at all. Poland has come up for that reason.
Let me send you some stuff.
Still very much so. It's still very much in flux in Poland, and like governments change, and nothing has officially happened or anywhere. But that was why that's been on our radar.
I guess the same thing in Russia too, right?
Yeah, I mean Russia's kind of a no-go zone for us, but yeah.
It's all so interesting, because do you take it from the perspective of, well, we're going to keep out of that then, or well, we do better long term by engaging in discussion?
Right.
Yeah. So I don't know what happens from there. I will definitely send you some stuff about this Andy No thing, because
that'd be great.
It was shocking to me, and then I thought, well, do I stir the pot and post something publicly about the fact that, well, everyone was happy to throw their arms up about Dubai, but nobody's having a conversation about Poland.
Right.
Portland.
Portland. Yeah, because Poland, we have been And that hasn't been huge and I think the reason the volume hasn't been loud is because as it's been come up, we've been engaging in conversations on, okay, here's where we are to date with it. Here's what we know from the people on the ground. Because that's the other piece is we're making sure that we're talking. So that's the reason I talked about like engaging with local communities. We've been really involved with the guilds that are in Poland. It's like, okay, so what's actually happening on the ground? How active, how relevant is this? News bites are hard to actually take a temperature off of. So
the big issue with the thing that's in Portland, I think, is going to be challenging because our industry is quite liberal. Right. And so their idea of what Antifa stands for, and for anyone, God, I got an email the other day from someone saying that I'm a staunch Republican. I am absolutely not. Like, I couldn't be anything further from being a staunch Republican. I'm a centrist people. I am open-minded and a logical thinker. So for me to be associated with any one polar side of anything is just hilarious. But Antifa is an extremist group. And so what's happening is that the tensions between Antifa and the extreme right are getting more and more tense. And we know the extreme right brings machine guns when they're being threatened. So this is what's happening. It's so much so that the governor of Portland, who also happens to be the police chief, has instructed the police that if Antifa engage in any kind of violence, they're not allowed to step in.
Wow.
So I'll send you some stuff so that you can get, I just didn't know if our industry, like if the SCA was across it and made the decision to do it there with an understanding of what was going on or not.
Well, we signed contracts for Expo and so on like 5 years out.
Yeah.
So we will all, and that's part of the problem to an extent with these things is their contracts that, certain things cannot break these contracts. Yeah. So there's huge financial implications and we sign them so far in advance. There's no way to know, like, how much has the world changed in the last 5 years, in the last 3 years? So there will constantly be these things that come up. And so, we kind of have it firmed up as to, we have the ED&I task force. And so everything runs through them. And as political climates change, we go back to the ED&I task force so we can figure out, hey, can you give us a report on this, the status on this, show recommendations for this? And, we've got colors that we use and then certain things and we say, hey, we're safe to go there, but we do need to put these recommendations out to the members, or whatever it may be, or, hey, this is a no-go zone. So before we select sites now, things go through our event site criteria. So before we select a site, it goes through their task force and they say, yes, we can go here, or no, we cannot go here. It does not line up with our values and our mission. This is not a place we'd recommend holding an event. So it works moving forward. Doesn't work for decisions that for ones that we've done in the past. Yeah.
I got to say, as someone who's been watching the kind of stuff that SCA has been doing for quite some time now, shit's moving and changing. And real credit to you. It's been really interesting to see things like the research organization that you guys have set up. I mean, it's so well overdue.
Yes, so overdue.
But congratulations.
God, yes.
And
thank you. Yeah, we're super excited about that.
And just like that, we've just been talking for 2 hours.
I know, isn't it crazy?
Fuck, it goes so quickly, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So thanks so much for doing this. I really appreciate it. It was.
I don't know. You and I have we've only had one conversation before. It feels like. So this is amazing to sit down and talk.
I'm gonna try and find some time to come up and see you at Klatch.
You're in San Diego, right? Okay. I might come down and see you.
Please do. Please do. We would have.
For sure.
We could go and get some really amazing tacos here. Let me tell you.
Oh, I love tacos. Tacos are my love language.
It's really funny. I didn't understand tacos and burritos because we don't do them in Australia.
Oh, you're missing out.
And then I moved here and it took me a minute to understand what the big deal is. And then I went 60 days straight eating burritos. It's all I ate for 60 days. I'm like, I think I finally understand the burrito obsession. I'm like, this is so wrong, but I can't not eat a burrito every day. It's crazy.
Yeah.
So it's one of the many
funny.
gifts.
I love Asia, but I could never move there because they do not understand Mexican food at all. And so I can't. I will never move. Not that I was gonna move there, but the 2 weeks that I was there, the day before we left, we had Mexican. The day we got home, we had Mexican because It's my jam.
I don't know how I've ever lived without it. Isn't that sad?
No, to me it makes perfect sense. Other people might, but it makes perfect sense.
I think
once you've had it, there's no living life without it.
No, and the flavors are so different to what, like, I grew up eating Arabic food, and I thought that they would have been very similar kinds of like spices, and it's just a whole new world. If you haven't got into that world, you've got to get into it. So come, we'll have tacos.
Okay, I'm in.
Done. Thanks so much, Heather.
It was great talking to you.
Likewise, lovely. I'll talk soon.
Thanks, Lee.
Bye.